Section 2.3, Day 2. Today we're going to talk a little bit about supply and demand. And when we talk about supply and demand, we have two different parties that we talk about. We talk about the supplier, and we talk about the consumer. We're the consumer, us people who go out and buy things, and then the producers are the ones who produce it and sell it to us. So we're going to talk about supply and demand. First thing I'm going to do, since it's more on our level and on what we think, is talk about what determines the amount that we're willing to pay for an item. So if you think about an item when it first is released, say maybe a new pair of Nike shoes, and everybody wants those Nikes. So what do we know about the price at that point when they first come on the market? So hopefully you're thinking about that, and you think that, oh yeah, the price is high. So if I think about a chart, and I think about it in terms of the number of units as being our independent value and our price being the dependent there, if we had a small number of units out there, we're willing to pay a fairly high price. Now think about that same pair of shoes maybe 6 months from the time that they're open, or that they are released. So what happens to that? So the number of units out there is increasing at that point, and what do we know about the price? That price, as the number of units are increasing, is coming down. So we see these values decreasing they can be exponentially, they can be linear, but ever so slightly. So we see that if there's a small number of units out in the marketplace, we are willing to pay a pretty high price. But as that number of units increases that's in the marketplace, then we're willing to wait until that price comes down a little more, and we're willing to pay less of a price as the number of units increase. We call this the demand curve. So we could connect these points, and it kind of goes in that fashion. Again, it could be linear, it could be exponential, just kind of depends on the product. So kind of a definition here, the demand curve is a relationship between the quantity wanted by the consumers, that's us, and the price of an item. As the quantity in the marketplace is increased, the price the consumer is willing to pay decreases. Alright, the next question I have is, what determines the amount a producer is willing to make? So now we got to think of it in the eyes of the producer, as the people who are making this. And again, we're going to talk about the number of units that are out there. You can't see my paper, can you? So the number of units out there versus the price. So if you think about the producer is interested in making money. They want to make the money. Money makes the world go round. So if they can produce, or if there's a low price or a low value on a product, then they're not going to want to produce many units. But as they can increase their price, then they're going to increase the number of units that they make as well. So at a small amount of units, or a small price, there's going to be a small number of units, but as the price increases, the number of units is going to also increase. So we're going to see maybe a graph that looks like this, which is going to be a positive relationship, or a positive correlation there. So as the price increases, the number of units that they're going to want to sell is also going to increase. And then here we go. So we have the supply curve is the relationship between the quantity provided by the producer and the price for the item. As the price increases, the quantity provided, the supply is going to increase as well. Alright, so market equilibrium. If I were to take these two curves, so if I take this demand curve, maybe we'll get a different color here, and we'll put the demand curve in red. So if I put my demand curve here, and if I take my, oh, we didn't call this the supply curve, did we? So if I take my supply curve in this fashion here, we see that we have the two graphs will at some point intersect. We don't know exactly where that's going to be, but when the demand curve and the supply curve intersect, we call this it's a very important point. It's called the equilibrium. And market equilibrium if you wish. So that's when the supply is going to equal the demand. Alright, so market equilibrium when supply equals our demand. So what can we do with this information? What we're going to ask you to do today is to be able to find where that market equilibrium occurs. So here we have a function, a supply function, 0.01 x squared plus 0.1 x plus 3, and a demand function, negative 100th x squared minus 2/10 x plus 8. And there's a couple ways that we're going to be able to go ahead and find this market equilibrium. One, we have a system of equations, so we can set up an algebraic form, or we can use our calculator. The couple things that I want to make sure that you see and we notice, if at any point in time you do one of these problems, make sure that we have one of the variables, the same variable, solved in each of our equations. If we don't have either p equals or x equals in either one of these equations, we're going to have some issues. So you got to make sure that you set those equal either to a p equals or x equals in each equation. Other things I want you to see is p is going to go for price. So p equals our price. And x is our quantity. Also with the quantity, you want to make sure that when we're doing a word problem, say, that you check to see what units we're in. So this quantity, even the price, the quantity could be in hundreds or it could be in thousands of units. So be very careful as you're doing your problems to make sure that you understand what the quantity is in. So how are we going to set up this problem? Well, first thing I want to do is show you how to do it algebraically, because we won't always have a calculator with us probably. So algebraically we have a system of equations. We know that p equals and p equals. So I can take these two equations and set them equal to each other. First thing I notice with this equation is we've got hundredths here, we have tenths here, hundredths here, and tenths here. So if I multiply both sides of my equation by 100, I'm going to get x squared plus 10x plus 300 is going to equal a negative x squared minus 20x plus 800. And that's going to clean up a lot of problems for me, especially all those decimal values. I have a quadratic, so I'm going to go ahead and move everything over to one side. So I get 2x squared plus 30x minus 500 equal to 0. And from here I can go ahead and solve that. Divide by 2, so I get x squared plus 15x minus 250 equals 0. I can factor, so I get x plus 25 and x minus 10 equal to 0. So I know that x is going to equal a negative 25 for this solution, or x is going to equal 10. If we go back to the context of the question, we know that x is the quantity that we're going to supply or demand. So we know that we can't demand a negative value or supply a negative value. So we know that our units is going to be 10. How do I find the price? If I take my 10 and I can plug it into either one of my equations, I'm going to go ahead and use my first one here. So p equals 0.01 or 100th of 10 squared, which is 100, plus 10 times a tenth, which is 1, plus 3. So here I get 1 plus 3, which gives me 5. So in the context of this question, my equilibrium, market equilibrium, is at 10 units, and it's going to be at $5 a unit. Now that should be a dollar sign there. Alright, so how can we do this in our calculator? Some of you are probably wondering and hoping that I'll show you with the calculator, and here we go. So in our calculator we can go to y equals, in y1, I'm going to type in my first equation. Oh, I guess I got to get over there. Don't make fun of me too much here. Plus a 10th x plus 3. In my second equation, I'm going to type in the second equation, so I get a negative 100th x squared minus 2/10 x plus 8. Alright, and then go ahead and check my windows. I get negative 15 to 15. We'll see what that looks like to start. It should be pretty close because our y-intercepts are 3 and 8. Since they're 3 and 8, we should be able to see that curve come in. And there's our point. That's what we're looking for. So we can go ahead and calculate. So second trace, we're looking for the intersection, number 5. First curve, you just go ahead and enter and enter and enter again. And we get this point 10, 5. So again, we got to be able to recognize that that 10 is our x value, and we don't have y's. We let y equal our p, so our price is going to be 5. So at $5, we're going to produce 10 units. And that gives you an idea of market equilibrium in our supply and demand curves. Good luck.